Have you ever wondered what it would be like to wake up in the Middle Ages, not as a king or a knight, but as an ordinary person? Imagine opening your eyes in a dark, damp room, the air heavy with smoke from a fire that barely warms you. The smell of sweat, unwashed bodies and animals seeps through the cracks in the wooden walls. There are no alarms, no coffee makers, no cozy bedsheets, only the harsh reality of survival. We often romanticize medieval times with shining castles, gallant knights and royal banquets. But the truth is far from glamorous. Life for most people was brutal, short and unforgiving. From disease and hunger to violence and lack of basic hygiene, every day was a battle just to stay alive. Today, we're going to take you on a journey back in time to explore why you wouldn't last even a single day in the medieval world. Let's begin with the very first challenge: food and hunger. In the Middle Ages, you wouldn't walk into a kitchen stocked with groceries or grab a quick snack from the fridge. Most people ate whatever they could grow, hunt, or afford, often very little. The average diet of a peasant was bland, repetitive, and lacking nutrition. Bread was the staple, often made with coarse grains that wore down teeth like sandpaper. Fresh fruits and vegetables were seasonal luxuries, and meat was rare for the poor. If you were lucky, you might get some pottage, a watery stew of grains and whatever scraps of vegetables were available. But hunger wasn't just about bland food. Famine was a constant threat. A bad harvest could mean starvation for entire villages. Imagine going to bed hungry night after night, your stomach aching, not knowing when you'd next eat a full meal. For us, skipping lunch feels like suffering. Back then, people skipped meals for days, even weeks, and it wasn't unusual for the weak to die in silence. And then, even if you had food, it wasn't safe. Without refrigeration, meat spoiled quickly. Bread might be contaminated with fungus, leading to hallucinations and illness. Drinking water was risky too, often polluted with human and animal waste. Most people drank weak ale instead, even children, because it was safer than water. But imagine living with a constant mild buzz just to avoid poisoning yourself. Now think about your own life. You complain when Wi-Fi is slow, or when your favorite restaurant runs out of your order. In medieval times, people worried if they would eat at all tomorrow. That alone might break you within hours. But hunger and unsafe food were only the beginning of your problems, because if the food didn't kill you, the hygiene and diseases certainly tried to. Let's move into the second ordeal: hygiene and disease. If you think a public restroom today is dirty, medieval sanitation would horrify you. There were no bathrooms in homes. In castles and towns, garderobes were small holes in walls where waste dropped down into pits or rivers. In villages, people often dumped their waste directly into the streets. Imagine the smell: rotting food, human excrement, animal dung, all mixed together and spreading through every narrow alley. Bathing was rare. Some people only bathed a few times a year, partly because clean water was hard to find, and partly because many believed bathing could make you sick. Soap was expensive, hot water was difficult to prepare, and winter made washing almost impossible. Dirt clung to skin, lice infested hair, and fleas spread everywhere. Diseases thrived in these conditions. The Black Death, one of the deadliest plagues in history, was spread largely by fleas carried on rats that infested medieval towns. Within a few short years in the 14th century, it wiped out almost half of Europe's population. Imagine boils swelling on your skin, fever burning through your body, and your family watching helplessly because there was no cure. Doctors, dressed in terrifying bird-like masks filled with herbs, could do little more than pray. But even without plagues, everyday illnesses were fatal. A small cut could get infected and kill you, since antibiotics didn't exist. Childbirth was dangerous for women, with high chances of death for both mother and baby. Teeth rotted quickly, leading to constant pain and infections that could spread to the bloodstream. People lived with fevers, parasites, and chronic hunger, conditions that would send us to the emergency room today, But in the Middle Ages, they were normal. So while you might not last a day with such filth and disease, medieval people simply adapted. Their immune systems fought daily battles, and survival often depended on sheer luck. And yet, even if you survived the filth and sickness, you had to endure something just as brutal: the harsh and unforgiving life of work and labor. Now let's step into the third nightmare of medieval life: labor and survival. From dawn to dusk, survival meant endless work. If you were a peasant, the majority of people, you lived in a one-room hut with your animals, sleeping on straw beside them for warmth. Each morning began before sunrise, and every day brought back-breaking tasks: tilling the soil, planting crops, harvesting grain, carrying water, chopping firewood. Tools were crude, and animals were the only machines. If you didn't work, you didn't eat. And even if you worked hard, a poor harvest meant starvation. Famine was always around the corner. Nobles and lords were no better off than peasants in terms of comfort, despite having power. Castles were drafty, cold and smoky from open fires. Even royalty shivered through winters in rooms without glass windows, wrapped in furs to keep warm. Servants struggled to prepare food in kitchens filled with smoke and ash, and spoiled meat was often covered with spices just to hide the taste. Children were not spared either. From the moment they could walk, they worked, feeding animals, gathering wood, or helping in fields. Education was a luxury for the rich. Most children never learned to read or write. Life expectancy was short. Many people died before the age of 40, and reaching 60 was considered remarkable. And if endless labor and hunger didn't break you, the cruelty of justice and violence certainly could. Crime and punishment were brutal beyond imagination. Stealing bread could mean your hand cut off. Accusations of witchcraft or heresy could send you to the stake, burned alive before a crowd. Torture devices like the rack, the Iron Maiden, and the stocks were not myths. They were real tools of fear. Trials were often unfair, decided by superstition or trial by ordeal, where you were forced to walk across hot coals or plunge your arm into boiling water. Survive and you were innocent. Fail and you were guilty. In such a world, even if disease and starvation didn't kill you, the law or mob justice might. And yet there was still one more challenge, perhaps the most terrifying of all: warfare. The final nightmare of medieval life was warfare, a reality that could arrive at your doorstep without warning. In the Middle Ages, Europe was constantly at war. Lords fought over land, kings fought over crowns, and crusades dragged thousands into bloody conflicts. For ordinary villagers, war meant destruction. Armies marched through the countryside, burning crops, stealing livestock, and leaving famine in their wake. Soldiers rarely spared peasants. Instead, they treated them as obstacles, or worse, prey. Battlefields themselves were scenes of horror. Forget the romantic image of knights in shining armor. Real combat was muddy, brutal, and short-lived. Swords, axes, and maces shattered bones. Arrows pierced armor and flesh alike, and when siege weapons came into play, entire towns could be reduced to rubble. Imagine boiling oil poured on invaders, catapults hurling stones into crowded castles, or battering rams crushing gates. Civilian casualties were enormous, and for the knights, life was hardly glorious. Armor was heavy and suffocating. Once you fell, it was difficult to stand again. Horses were expensive and often killed in battle, leaving knights stranded in chaos. Even survival didn't guarantee peace. Captured knights might be ransomed, but common soldiers were often slaughtered. For the common folk, there was no safety. If your village wasn't burned, your fields might be seized. If you weren't killed, you might be forced into conscription or servitude under a new ruler. Every war meant new taxes, new hardships, and new graves dug into the earth. By the end of it all, one thing becomes clear. Medieval life was not the fairy tale of castles, kings, and chivalry we often imagine. It was a relentless struggle to survive against hunger, disease, injustice, and war. Now that we've walked through the grim realities of medieval life, let's pause and reflect. The Middle Ages weren't a romantic fairy tale. They were a brutal struggle for survival. Every single day was uncertain. Disease could strike without cure. Hunger could gnaw at your belly. Injustice could chain your life to servitude. And war could sweep away your home in an instant. When we look at history honestly, we see how far humanity has come. Safer food, modern medicine, human rights, education, and opportunities that our ancestors could only dream of. But there's also a deeper truth here. History teaches us gratitude. Every comfort we take for granted, electricity, clean water, antibiotics, freedom of choice, was once unimaginable. Remembering the suffering of those before us isn't just about learning facts. It's about realizing how fragile life is and how much we owe to progress, resilience, and the sacrifices of generations past. If this journey through medieval times opened your eyes, then don't keep it to yourself. Share this story with others, leave a comment about what shocked you most, and subscribe for more powerful journeys into history. Your support helps keep these stories alive, reminding us of where we came from and why we must never forget.